Hey guys, what is going on? So I wanted to talk about my most recent training progress and why progress in one area might actually lead to a short-term regression in another area, and why the relationship between size and strength isn't exactly as linear as people will make it out to be. And I will just use some examples from my training, both currently and in the past, and also use examples of other people and why this can help you in your training if you want to achieve specific goals, right? So I will use myself as an example. Currently, yesterday, I did flat bench for the first time in a while. This is something that I've not been doing recently, and I will kind of dive into that in a bit. But basically, tried to flat bench yesterday, and I failed an attempt at 350 pounds, which is funny because prior to me taking testosterone or ecdystone or anything like that, my bench max was actually 355. Fairly recently, I was able to bring that up to 375 at an all-time low in terms of my body fat percentage. So obviously I was making progress in that regard after stalling for a while. And now that I'm in a bulk, and now that I am about 10 pounds heavier than I was back when I hit that 375 max, my strength has regressed. And I think a lot of people would look at that and they'd be like, oh, you're losing gains, you're losing progress. When in reality, I've actually put on some lean body mass since then. And I feel like I am making progress, just not necessarily in that same vector, right? So, this is something that I've talked about several times on this channel, but I go through phases where I focus entirely on hypertrophy, and then I will try to unlock that strength by focusing on strength training, doing reps that are closer to a 1 rep max, building up to a max, doing speed work, doing a variety of things that can improve my actual maxes and my overall strength numbers, which you think would go up as I'm gaining muscle, but that is obviously not the case. As I'm training in a rep range that is entirely not specific to that type of training, right? So when you are a beginner, if you get stronger and you're getting bigger at the same time, it seems like there's this obvious correlation there. And if you look at a lot of studies, if you're trying to measure progress, you're using individuals that aren't necessarily all that advanced. Because if you were to use advanced lifters in studies, the rate of progression would be so small that there wouldn't be any statistical significance, and therefore it doesn't really make sense to use advanced trainees to measure progress in a study, especially when time and resources are not unlimited, right? So to use somebody like me for an example, it might make sense to use a longitudinal study for somebody like me, whereas if you're actually doing studies on the effectiveness of like a supplement, for example, you wouldn't use somebody like me because my progress is so relatively slow, right? So in all these studies, there seems to be this very obvious correlation, and obviously in anecdotal stuff as well. Anybody who's trained in the past can tell you that at least in the early stages, they got stronger and bigger on a linear basis, right? So this just seems to be common knowledge. You get bigger, you get stronger, you get stronger, you get bigger, right? But that's not really the case as you get more advanced. And as you get more specific in your training, you'll find that as you shy away from one aspect of training, that aspect that you shy away from is going to get worse, right? Your endurance in a specific lift might not be there if you don't do those types of lifts. If you're not using heavy weights, your strength might go down temporarily. You could potentially be fatigued from doing higher volume when you're doing split training versus, let's say you're doing squat, bench, deadlift, and you're a power lifter, right? All of these things, the more specific that you are, means that you're going to get better at those specific activities. And when you stop doing those activities, you're going to get worse at them. That's just the way that it is. You can't have everything that you want. So there's this saying that you can have anything that you want, but you can't have everything. And that applies very much to powerlifting, bodybuilding, all these things. You can't be simultaneously as lean as possible, as strong as possible, as big as possible, right? You need to focus on a specific area, and other things are going to take a hit in the short term, right? So for me, failing a 350 bench, initially I was like, okay, I'm not really happy with that. Obviously, I've actually regressed in strength from the start of this whole experiment. But the reality of the situation is that I haven't really been benching for like 2 months straight. I've been doing, some decline benches here and there, very low volume on those, obviously not hyper specific to flat bench. I haven't been going all that heavy. I haven't been doing a lot of volume in those areas. And I've been doing very taxing chest and shoulder work to be able to build those muscles. And obviously I've improved significantly in my chest and in my shoulders over the past year or so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in this specific moment, when I'm not training those muscles in the high strength kind of portion of my training, well, my strength is just not going to be there. When I get more specific, when I start benching 3, 4, 5 times a week, however many times I end up doing it, as I start ramping those weights up, doing speed work, working on, tricep strength, explosion, out of the bottom, all these different things that I do when I get more specific with my bench press will skyrocket. It's not uncommon for me to start to do a different variation with bench press and start to hit PRs in that lift, in that specific variation, every single time I train it. Like I'll literally, every single time I go into the gym, I'll be able to add weight to the bar just because I am not used to doing that specific movement in this specific time period, right? So very kind of controversial thing to say that muscle, when you gain muscle, it doesn't immediately correlate into strength gains, but you can kind of unlock that strength if you are more specific with your training, right? So just wanted to kind of get that out there. So my strength temporarily has actually taken a hit as I've been getting more muscular, and I actually have put on a little bit of lean body mass so far in this bulk. I'm hoping that that can continue, and that is my primary goal. Another example that I've used in the past, so prior to me ever starting testosterone or anything like that, actually years ago, I was able to hit a 245-pound overhead press after just focusing on the lift for a very short period of time. So my first time ever doing overhead press, I was able to do 165 pounds. This was pretty untrained. This was after learning the movements. And I put on 80 pounds to my overhead press in a very short period of time just by focusing on that movement and actually prioritizing it, doing it as one of my first lifts in my workouts. And since then, I've put on a pretty substantial amount of size, most of that being after trying testosterone and ectosterone, stuff like that. And more specifically, I feel like the areas that are most kind of utilized in that movement being the upper back, specifically the shoulders. My shoulders have grown disproportionate to everything else in my body. They have had the best gains over the last year or so. And like I said, this lift was 2 years ago that I was able to hit 245. I have it on video. It didn't even actually look all that hard, and I could have potentially even got another 5 or 10 pounds. And as of recent, with all this added shoulder mass, added upper back mass, overall just getting bigger, higher body weight, everything like that, I just tried and my max was 225 pounds. So lost 20 pounds on my overhead press, but I'm not doing that lift. I haven't done overhead press. I haven't really done, like I said, bench press. And so those numbers are going to go down temporarily. But like I kind of showed when I was cutting on testosterone, on ectosterone, I was able to increase my bench press max by being specific on that lift, even when I wasn't in a surplus. And, that's something that I plan to do here again, is as I continue to bulk up, I'm going to be adding more muscle, and then I can kind of unlock that strength in the future. And that's my plan, to be able to eventually bench press 405 pounds, which would be a 30-pound PR. And I think that is in the cards if I continue to build, that size right now, and then a couple months down the line, work on my strength and kind of unlock that. So I just wanted to put that out there because a lot of people are just kind of gauging their success purely on their strength numbers or purely on, the way that they look on any given day in the mirror. And there are a bunch of different ways to measure progress. And when you're in the gym, obviously it depends on the specificity of your training. And I just kind of wanted to make that clear for those who are asking about my strength numbers, thinking that that dictates what my progress is, when in reality, I'm not focusing on that right now. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that. I'll keep you updated, and I'll talk to you soon.